What does remembrance mean to you? I wonder what goes wandering in the whirlwind through your mind when it's this time of the year too. What is it that you're remembering? A friend or a brother, a father or mother? Perhaps it's your sister or wife or husband, or, God forbid, it's a child you're remembering. I'm not so arrogant to assume that I can put words into your mouths and say, I know what you're feeling, or I know where you've been, but I can tell you what I remember, and you compare the scene. Well, I remember two boys and one looking up to the other. I remember two stories, but bloodline connected these brothers. I remember bullies and you showing up to stop them. I remember black eyes, the tough lessons, and you giving them. I remember goodbyes and promises that you were always coming back. I remember phone calls, arguments, and our petty screaming match. I remember you sat in the audience for my first ever show. You caught me off guard because I never thought that you would go. I remember Dragon Ball Z in our living room and threats to never tell. Not a word to anyone. You would drag me down to hell. I remember being at work and having to call our dad. I remember Leslie's office because I trashed it really bad. I remember the rivers that came streaming down from my face. I remember cursing everything, even the time and the place. I remember waiting to see you carried off of a plane. I kept quiet as they marched you on. No, I wouldn't show my pain. I remember the streets filled with friends and strangers came to see the boy from our little town who won a posthumous VC. I remember a normal man who played football and drank beer. He drank tequila, he drank vodka, Jaeger, he had no fear. I remember that I am getting older, and that you never will. Time's moving on and I'm growing up, and yet you're always still. I remember you'll never be there if I get married, if I have kids. We will never grow old together, and you will never remember this. You'll never meet your nephews or see your niece again. The people you saved had families. It wasn't for me, it was for them. I remember this pain, this loss, it's all embedded deep, scarred into my heart and flesh so bad I still don't sleep. I remember this every day, and I'm never able to forget the sacrifice made by you and countless other vets. But it's those you loved and left behind who loved you just like me, who remember you all day and night, all year round, and that is a guarantee. For some, it's just a time of year to acknowledge our heroes who gave more than you could give. They gave their all for you and I, so we can relax, enjoy, and live. That's all very hard to do because it hurts that you're not here. There's a space missing at our table and it's gathering more dust every year. I remember all my pride that I feel because of you. You give me hope and strength when I don't know what to do. I remember all of this. You'll live on in my words too. Now one last time, let me ask, what does remembrance mean to you?
Hello everybody, welcome to the Patriot Show. I'm your host, Anthony Stephen Malone. We have a very special guest on the show today, Kevin Brazier, historian, lecturer and author. Hello Kevin, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good man. A lot of my viewers and colleagues would have come across your name because you've written a book on the Victoria Cross and the George Cross and a lot of other books and publications. Before we go into that, can you give us a little bit of history, please, about you as an individual?
Yeah, absolutely sure. Yeah, I left school at 16, pretty much unable to read and write. I was diagnosed as dyslexic at 18. It's a cliche, but it was a day that literally changed my life because I never knew. The first proper book I ever read, believe it or not, was Jaws. It was very popular at the time I left school.
Yeah.
And everyone was watching the film, so I struggled for the book. And this actually gave me a passion for reading, which I'd never had before. So I more or less taught myself to read. That's how I got diagnosed at 18. And, you know, I've pretty much gone through life avoiding jobs that involve too much writing and reading for obvious reasons. And then in my late 40s, I thought, this is ridiculous. I really need to head this on and take this on much more seriously. My wife at that time had just got her own home computer. So I started messing around on the computer just to see what I could do. Very little, in fact. About 12 years ago, as a project for myself, I decided I'll see if I could list Victoria Cross holders in chronological order, because all the books list them alphabetically. And it took about 10 months. I did it completely wrong. I started by getting Zulu out and doing the 11 from there, and then getting books off of my shelves and writing them down. Completely the wrong way to do it. But eventually I produced a list of what was then 1,358 VC holders. And got them into chronological order. All sorts of problems with what do you do with guys who are ordered on the same date, or for those that were issued for a run of days, weeks, or sometimes even months. So I had to sort out a system for having that. Very few were done by time. There's one or two where we know the time of day, and we're specific about it. So I was able to use that, but I didn't use that very often. But by the time I'd finished doing that, I'd collected so much information. I thought, well, perhaps I could put this into a book. Yeah, me, write a book, real off. So I thought, well, what the hell, I'll do it. I'll probably never get it published. But I thought I'd have a go and write this book. The original idea was to have the chronological listing in the book, but I was only going to write up 100, 150 or so of the stories, and I was going to call it The Bravest of the Brave. So it was very easy to decide initially the first batch to go in, and to a certain extent even the first batch to leave out. But as time went on, it became more and more difficult to decide whether someone should be in or not. So in the end, I thought, no, I can't leave anyone out. So not only did I not intend to write a book, the book I wrote was not the book I intended to write. Whereas again, the original concept would have been about their life stories, being so few of them. With all of them in the book, I could only really do their VC actions. Otherwise, the book would have been about eight volumes or something. Yeah. So that's the position I was in. So I did that. It took about 2 years, 3 years to research and write. And then, of course, I think, well, now I've done it, try and get it published. I must have written to around 50 publishers. Wow. And again, I did that by starting to the books behind me there, by literally getting publishers' names out of my books and writing to them. And you get you get ignored by most. You get a few. Actually, some of my books are so old. Some of them are no longer trading. Letters returned as undelivered. But eventually, I got a letter from Pen and Sword, asking or saying that they were interested in the book and could I give them a more detailed synopsis of it. And I was so naive. I hadn't even included my email address in the letters. Oh, can we have your email address? So they sent me a formal proposal, which I filled out. And within a week, they'd come back to me and said, yes, we want to take the book on. I was absolutely gobsmacked. Never thought anything like that would ever happen. I did actually get to meet my commission editor, and I asked him, I said, well, why did you say yes to this particular book? I'm an absolute first timer, And he said, well, we've done a few books on the VC, but there was nothing before this comprehensive. So that's kind of why they were keen to do it, you see. So when that was done and dusted and published, I kind of got the bug to write by this time. And I thought, well, the story's not really complete because now there is the George Cross as well. So I went on to write the George Cross book, and as you mentioned, the Blue Max as well. And I never looked back, really.
Okay, so yes, so you've done a lot of research as an historian. You've spent a lot of time on this, getting the books right. The information in your books is incredible. Even from a military perspective, a lot of the guys who have served won't be aware of a lot of the information as that is actually out there in your books. Can you tell us who was the first person to be awarded the Victoria Cross?
The first person to earn is a bit of, not controversy, but it depends on what you mean by first. The first person to earn it was George Lucas, who was in the Navy. It was during the Crimea War, obviously the first batch war from Crimea. And he was actually in the Baltic. He couldn't be further away from the Crimea, but as a two-pronged war effort, we were trying to draw off Russians to go to the Baltic. So we were attacking and bombarding several forts up there. And a large live shell landed on the deck of his ship. Everybody else dived for cover. He ran over to it, picked it up, threw it over the side, and it almost immediately, it almost immediately exploded. Not only must have been very heavy, it must have been hot as well, because it would have been it's literally the old style of fuzzing cannonball type of thing you'd see on cartoons. It was that kind of a shell. I think he was immediately promoted. And of course, there was no award at the time. It was only after the war that they decided that they introduced the Victoria Cross. And so he would have been the first to earn it. But when the first batch were awarded in Hyde Park, there were 65 of the first 111 were done by the Queen herself. And he wasn't first, I think he was 7th. Because by then ranks had all changed and it was awarded by rank. So the highest ranks got theirs first. If you're all getting the same award, it's done by rank. If you're getting different awards, a private would go before a general if he was getting the VC, as happened with Johnson Bahari. He was shocked to find that he was getting his award before everybody else because his was getting the VC. The first 7 all went to the Navy for various actions, some on land, but and after that, the 8th was the first Army medal.
Okay, there's a lot of history there. I know there's a lot of controversy about the next question, and a lot of people have different opinion. In your opinion of because I know what you say is accurate, where does the medal come from for the VC, the medal?
Yes, this is a very fascinating subject, actually. When the medal was designed by Prince Albert, they talked about what to make it of. And some people said we should make it of a precious metal. And it was Victoria who said, no, I think it should be made of a base metal. The medal itself should be worthless. What it stands for should be its value. And someone, we're not sure who, came up with the idea about, what about using metal from captured guns from the recent war? They never called it the Crimea then. They just referred to it as the recent war. So Queen said, that's absolutely fantastic. We'll use guns from the Crimea. And it appears they probably did initially. The 2 guns that are in the Woolwich Arsenal, which are of China, which are now used to make the VC, were first used in 1924. So that's 68 years after the VC came into being. So for those years, it probably was metal from the Crimea. We've got no way of proving it one way or the other now. But there's no reason to assume it wasn't. I'm assuming that in 1924, that medal had run out. So they opted to use these 2 guns that they got from, actually captured in the 1860s in the Third China War at the Taking Forts, where a number of VCs were awarded during that action, actually. So those are the guns, or the metal that are used now. Those are the guns that you see in the Woolwich Arsenal that they always present as these are the guns the VCs are made from. However, the story is more complicated. During the Second World War, the medal was put away for safekeeping and it got lost. So from 1942 to 1945, another medal was used. until the original metal was found again in 1945. So we know at least 3 different types of metal have been used. And we know this partly also because Hancocks now have all the medals that come back to them X-rayed. And they do this as part of identification, so they can prove whether a medal is genuine or not. Because obviously there are some fakes floating around. And if they've got a run of metals they know are made from this metal, and someone comes up with a metal in that run and it's different, they kind of pretty much know it's not an original medal. Since about 1906, they've put a mark on all VCs they've made, which is not visible to the naked eye. So only they can tell whether this is a genuine medal. So anything prior to that is harder to establish.
Right. Very interesting. A lot of people have asked a lot of questions about that, where the metal comes from. I hope that answers the question. It also expels a couple of the myths that are out there as well. You've researched every VC that was ever awarded. That is a colossal amount of research. Which VCs, I know this is a very difficult question, which VC stories or citation stands out to yourself out of all of them?
Well, I always say I don't have favourites, but I do. As an individual, Sir Evelyn Wood, he was 16 at the start of the Crimea in the Naval Brigade. He fought under Sir Robert Peel, who later founded the police. He probably earned the VC 3 or 4 times during the Crimea. However, by the end of the war, he'd left the Navy and joined the Army. And when the medal was introduced, no one in the Navy wanted to promote him because he was no longer employed by them, and no one in the Army was interested because he hadn't fought for them during the Crimea. So he missed out there. He did eventually get the VC for action in the Indian Mutiny. The award itself must have been quite disappointing because it was actually sent to him by registered post. So he stands out. He was a deaf hypochondriac, very vain man, but he incredibly brave, done incredibly things. I mean, he's still serving up until the First World War. We owe so much to him in terms of places like Salisbury Plain. He got that. He improved soldiers' welfare, well-being, rights for soldiers on leave, things like that. We owe the man so much. Others, you've always got to think of the 3 double VCs. Only 3 men have been awarded it twice. Charles Upham, Noel Chavas and Arthur Martin Leake, 2 medical, 1 combat. Then there are the 2 youngest VC holders, both of whom were 15 years and 3 months. One during the Indian Mutiny and one, I can't remember who one was, off the top of my head. Nope, he's gone. I'll have to look that up later. We don't know the exact date of birth for one of them, so we're not quite sure which was the youngest. We know they were both 15 and 3 months. So there's those. There are so many incredibly brave things. You read them and you just think, how did these guys go and do that? How did they put themselves up for this? So you can't really pick out individuals. Those are the ones that kind of stand out for me.
In my opinion, anyone who's been awarded the VC is equal across the board, because to
Absolutely, I agree with
something like that is incredible, and it takes a lot of bravery for someone to be awarded for their actions to get that. You spent time in Rocks Drift as well, also a place where the VC was obviously earned by members of the forces. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, Rocks Drift, 11 VCs, the most for a single action. More have been awarded in a single day, but this action, Rocks Drift action, was overnight, so it's a single action. 11 in total. A lot of people, and it was generally thought at the time that so many are awarded because they saved Natal from invasion. It was never the Zulu intention to invade Natal, although we were probably unaware of that at the time. Yeah. And I don't really buy into that theory also because you have to look at how those 11 VCs came about. At the end of the action, when Lord Chelmsford got back to Rocks Drift, Chard and Bromhead recommended 6 men for the VC, all from the 24 foot. Chelmsford added Chard and Bromhead's name to that list and sent it up, and they were all gazetted in May 1879. And then sometime later, it was kind of muted. So, well, how is it that only Imperial soldiers have been awarded the VC? So the whole thing was looked at again, and Surgeon Reynolds' VC was gazetted in June, James Dalton was gazetted in November, and Sheesy's was gazetted in December. So by this time, of course, the war was over. The war ended in July. So even when the first 8 were gazetted, the war was effectively over. So I don't really buy into this idea that it was probably conceived a little bit by some people at the time. They sort of saved the empire. They certainly saved the embarrassment of the previous British defeat at Saint-Laurent.
You come across a word there. Some of my viewers, some will be familiar with it, but some won't. You use the word gazetted. Can you explain what that is, please?
Gazetted. Yeah, the London Gazette. All awards of any type are announced in the London Gazette, and it's being known in military terms as gazetted. And it's as simple as that. It has a serial number. You can look them up online. You can find all the awards for anything, not just the VC.
Thank you for that. A lot of my viewers will be aware of that, just in case they weren't, and they're wondering, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What was the most VCs awarded in one day?
That was at Lucknow during the Indian Mutiny, where there were 24 awarded. But it wasn't a single action. Lucknow was a siege, and there was things going on all over the city at the same time. Some of those awards actually are for a run of 2 or 3 days, including the same day that the others were awarded. So it's a bit ambiguous as whether it's how you count it. Everyone likes to count things differently.
Okay. Your motivation and drive to do the research you've done for these books is phenomenal. The amount of work that you've had to do and dedication. Why did you pick the VC as a book and the George Crosser as a book?
When I was about 15 or 16, my dad took me to the Imperial War Museum, and on display there was the VC awarded to first class boy John Cornwall, often referred to as Jack. And he got his at 16, so he was kind of the same age as me. Yeah. He got his for the Battle of Jutland, pretty much because of a press campaign. He died. He's basically stayed at his gun when all the others were killed or wounded or left, and he was found at his gun, dying after the action was over. He was buried initially in a pauper's grave somewhere in the north, when the fleet came back to the UK. His mother never even got to see him. She went up and he died before she got back. He was moved to London, buried in London now, Manor House. And then a bit of a press campaign started about his bravery, got a lot of publicity, so he was awarded the Victoria Cross. It was the first one I saw, and he was my age. So I've always had that interest, like past and interested in the VC, really because of that, I think.
Okay, I just wanted to wanted me viewers to be aware of a little bit of the backstory, because the work you've done on the medals, not just the VC and the George Cross, all the other books, is incredible. The amount of information in your books, people can learn so much of this. If people want to read your books and see everything else that you've written as well, where can they find that information?
Well, they could get copies directly from me. I do have some here, but obviously also anywhere like the publisher, Pen and Sword, or Amazon. If they get them directly from me, obviously I sign them. Always like to do a nice dedication. So any of those options, really. Okay.
Going from a lot of the history, going from a long time ago all the way up to modern day, the Falklands War, some VCs were issued there as well. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, there were 2. H. Jones, probably everybody knows about, who is commander of one of the parachute battalions there. A little controversial, his VC. Some say he shouldn't have been leading from the front, but some say, personally, I don't have a problem with it. The action stalled. He wanted to kick it. He wanted to get going. He said to right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go off. And a lot of guys in the past have got the VC from leading from the front. Yeah. Maybe it's more controversial to do that in modern warfare, but that's what he got it for. There's a second one there, which is John Mackay. John Mackay. He got a VC there as well. His was also posthumous. But there were just the 2 awarded there.
Okay. Coming up to a recent conflict that everyone will have heard of, Afghanistan. which VCs were awarded in Afghanistan?
There's been a number, but mostly for Australia and New Zealand. In the 1990s, Commonwealth countries were allowed to introduce their own award system. And both Australia and New Zealand and Canada introduced the VC, their own VC. And it's surprising, it's called the Victoria Cross for Australia, New Zealand or Canada. Canada is yet to issue any. I think New Zealand have issued one, and Australia, I think, have issued 3 or 4. I'm not entirely sure. But it's still, in my opinion, counts as a VC. Some people disagree. Some people say it's a completely separate award. You ask any of the old school Victoria Cross holders, and they say, of course, it's a VC. And I'm sure if you ask any of the guys that have been awarded it, they would also say, yes, it's a VC. But some people have different opinions about that, obviously.
Yeah. During World War II, Operation Market Garden, 5 Victoria Crosses were awarded there as well. I'm doing a special interview on them in the near future. But can you tell us a little bit about Market Garden and those Victoria Crosses?
Yeah, Market Garden. Montgomery's plan to end the war before Christmas, where we heard that before. Went wrong for so many reasons, very complicated situation. 4 of the 5 VCs were awarded posthumously. The only one surviving was Kane, who's probably fairly well known. He's Clarkson's father-in-law. The other 4 are all posthumous. One of them is even buried as unknown. We think we know which grave is his because him and another body were found near his VC site in the early 70s. By workmen widening the road, but there wasn't enough evidence to suggest it was him, so he is buried as unknown, but we think we kind of know which one is his grave. Yeah. One of them was Lloyd, who was part of the transport, resupplying. He was killed when he was trying to drop more supplies, and he refused to give up when his plane was hit and carried on flying. He was killed. One was awarded at the bridge itself. Keynes was awarded in Arnhem, as were the other 2. Barskyfield was one of the ones. He was manned an anti-tank gun, having lost a leg, and he carried on firing to keep the Germans at bay.
Yeah, that'll be a special interest to a lot of my viewers, because obviously I've served in the Parachute Regiment, Airborne Forces. A lot of my viewers will be interested in that as well. Watch out for a special interview from Arnhem very shortly. You're going to like that one. Kevin, can you tell us, you've done the Victoria Cross, you've also done the George Cross as well. Can you tell us what the difference is between the 2 awards?
In essence, it's quite complicated in a way. The VC was initially awarded to civilians. There are 4 or 5 awards that went to civilians. There are some awards that were given of the Victoria Cross that would now be awarded the George Cross instead. In 1940, the George Cross was introduced by the King for those serving on the home front. So it really meant, not exclusively, but it pretty much meant civilians, civilian bravery. The initial ones all went to bomb disposal guys who are all civilians, all pretty much untrained, literally learning the job on the job. And the citations for both of the VC was slightly changed. So in essence, the George Cross is for bravery when not in the face of the enemy, and the Victoria Cross is for bravery when in the face of the enemy. And it all boils down to what you call the face of the enemy. Matthew Croucher got his in Afghanistan. He got the George Cross. They were behind enemy lines. They were in an enemy compound. He tripped an enemy booby trap, and he threw his backpack onto it, dived on it effectively to stop it killing his comrades. He gets the George Cross because there were no enemy present. Now, I think the splitting hairs here is pretty incredible, but the roles of the VC and the GC have always been implied fairly rigidly. Politics does and always has played its part. A good example is when the original warrant was written, there was no mention of posthumous awards. But the powers that be who were awarded it decided it would only go to those who survived.
Yeah.
So until 1907, that was the case. And Merville and Coghall, the famous VCs from Issa Noana, who were both killed, didn't get their medals until 24 years after their VC action, because Lord Roberts' son, also called Lord Roberts, he was effectively awarded the first posthumous award during the Boer War when they rushed it through because they knew he was dying. And it caused a bit of an outcry. People were saying, well, why didn't my son, father, brother get it? They died in their action. So the King authorised 2 batches of 6 backdated VC awards, and basically drew a line under it. So we will not do any more backdated, but from now on, it will be allowed to be awarded backdated. Will be allowed to be awarded posthumously. And it's an interesting point. People say, oh, it wasn't allowed posthumously. Well, there was never really anything against it. It's just that's what they decided to do. And another incredible example of that is during the Indian Mutiny, and 7 men decided to blow up the magazine to stop the rebels capturing it. 3 of them survived, got the Victoria Cross. 4 that died, got nothing.
Yeah, but interesting facts there, though. Very interesting information on that as well. You've also written another book called Blue Max. Can you give us a bit of information on that, please?
Yeah, the Blue Max, its proper name is the Bloody Merit. It's a Prussian award. And the first question most people ask is, why does the Prussian award have a French title, a French name? And the simple answer is French was the language of the imperial courts of Europe. So everybody spoke in the royal courts, everybody spoke French. So it has a French name. The name the Blue Max is said to have come from Max Inman, who was one of the first pilots to be awarded during the First World War. And it was said that the blue enamel matched the blue of his eyes. Whether this is true or not, we don't know. But that's where the nickname, the Blue Max, come from. It started in around 1760, and it was abolished with the abdication of the Kaiser in 1918.
Okay, that's it's interesting to see the medals and the history of the medals, and most importantly, the people, the backstories of who they actually are. These normal gentlemen and ladies and so on, who have been and they've received a lot of the awards. Your books have got so much information in there. People will read it and reread it as well. What other book projects, I know we spoke about this, what other book projects have you got in the pipeline at this moment in time?
Well, I finished a 3-volume history on, or same type of book on the German Knight's Cross, the Second World War, the volume 1 of which should be out within the next few weeks. I have just put in the finishing touches to the Medal of Honor, and they will also have the titles to complete. So that completes the set of completes. And since then I moved on. I'm now currently doing a book for Pen and Sword on the Zulu and Boer Wars. And in these books I will be able to do a full biography of each recipient rather than just their VC action. So I'm going to expand the stories considerably and finding a lot more new information even I wasn't aware of. That hopefully may be out by the end of this year, I hope.
Okay. Do you find when you're researching a story or a medal or an individual, do you normally uncover a lot more information to the actual stories and the citations?
Yeah, very much so. There's so much going on. I mean, you try to include as much as you can in a book, but space always gets the better of you, and you always have to, some things you leave out. I do a talk on the Victoria Cross, and I've got stuff in the talk that's not in the books. So partly because there was room, partly because some of it I discovered after the book was published.
Which is the most interesting and unexpected piece of information you've come across during all of your research into the VC and the George Cross as well?
That's an interesting question.
Because you've got access to so much information. Did you ever come across something that you really were not expecting?
Yeah, there's a number of interesting stories. One of my favourites is a chap called William Bearsford, who got his the day before the Battle of Alundi during the Anglo-Zulu War, which was the last battle of the war. But on a reconnaissance the day before, him and a few other guys came across an ambush by a lot of Zulus, and they were trying to get away. And one of the chaps fell off his horse, and Bearsford went back for him to help him, and he was assisted by a chap called O'Toole. And while he was trying to help this chap up, he basically said, "Oh, leave me! I'm done for. Leave me." And Bearsford was known as a bit of a character and a bit of a spoke his mind. And he said to him, "If you don't get up now, I'll punch you in the head." So he basically assisted him. They got away. He was assisted by O'Toole. Went back to England. The Queen was about to pin the Victoria Cross on him, and he said, "Ma'am, I cannot, in all honesty, accept this award if it isn't shared with O'Toole, who helped me during this action, who hadn't been, because O'Toole had not been recommended." So the Queen said, "You will take the award, and I will look into that." And duly, O'Toole was recommended for the medal as well.
Right, and again, that is another incredible bit of the backstory, because for every medal awarded, there's always a backstory. There's what the public know, then there's there's a lot more to that as well. Okay, Kevin, thank you so much for coming on the Patriot Show. This interview is one of 9 special feature interviews on the Victoria Cross. So thank you for sharing your expertise. The links to your books will be underneath the interview as well. So if my viewers, if you click on the little button, you'll be able to see the links, the bio, and all the information that you need to go and look at some of these books. I highly recommend that you do. Very interesting. You'll learn a lot more than what you're expecting to. Kevin, again, thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
Would you like to say anything else to my viewers?
I mean, I know you're into the Victoria Cross Trust as well, and I'd just like to mention, as I always do, I'm a patron of the Trust. Yeah. They're a wholly unfunded organisation who restore the graves of those awarded the Victoria Cross, the ones which are not cared for by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. So I always like to give them a mention. They do fantastic work. You can look them up, the VCT, and they need donations to carry on their excellent work.
Right. I got my T-shirt from there.
Yes,
as well. If you go on and they've got a shop, it's not very big. Have a look at it. The T-shirts are brilliant, and the work they do to clean the graves as well is incredible. Kevin, thank you so much for bringing that up as well.
You're welcome.
If you can stay on the line for a minute, I'm just going to close the interview down.
Sure.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching the Patriot Show. I think that would have been informative, emotional, and thought-provoking, as always. Please stay on the line, and you'll see some trailers for small veteran-owned companies, both in the United Kingdom and the United States. Please support a veterans company whenever you can. Thank you very much. Catch you on the next show. Stay safe.